Welcome to 3 Minute Warning, a Canadian Football League podcast and a member of All Sports All Plays Network. I'm Dallas Bergen. You can find me on Twitter at CFL Fans Toronto, and I'm with Bill Beer at Pigskin Punk 13. Bill and I are both CFL fans. Myself, a long-time and lifelong fan, but Bill here is a super fan, but a new fan, just getting into the CFL this year and taking great interest. And so we're trying to share the CFL game with, of course, CFL fans, but also trying to draw new fans to the game. We want to remind you that all CFL games are available on ESPN Plus in the United States and on TSN in Canada. Welcome to episode 6 of the 3 Minute Warning. How are you doing today, Bill?
Good. I'm doing great. Great. We had another great weekend of CFL football. Very exciting. Very exciting. I'm really enjoying the season. I'm enjoying, the pieces of the puzzle coming together for the playoffs, because we got Winnipeg, who is the first team to have a playoff berth, which that shouldn't be a surprise, but it's exciting. It's exciting to see how, teams that we thought at the beginning of the season that were going to be good or have better records, they haven't done so well. And teams that, we thought they were done after a certain point, they're starting to do better. So it's exciting that, we get to watch this all play out. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, this is really crunch time right now, and we see some teams on the decline, as you mentioned, Saskatchewan coming off a number of losses consecutive. Is that 4 in a row? It is, isn't it? 2 to Calgary, 2 to Winnipeg.
Yeah.
So lots of questions there, and yet Saskatchewan still sits second in the West Division. And then you have a team like Montreal, who's second in the East, and yet they managed to pull out a great win by Matt Schultz leading the way, and the defense with all those sacks, which we'll talk about. But that doesn't really look like a second place team, kind of a team that hasn't pulled together a full team win all season. And so we're into the best part of the season where you get to see how the rest of the standings settle out after Winnipeg, of course, who's been so dominant this year at 9-1. And there's no doubt they are Grey Cup favorites in the Classic League right now. But let's talk about some news this week. Lots of interesting things happening this week in the CFL. What have you got atop your list, Bill?
The top of the list has to be, we had a big trade. Trevor Harris was traded to Montreal from the Edmonton Elks in exchange for American defensive end Antonio Simmons. So, did this shock you when you heard this? Was this something that blew your socks off?
Yeah, I think leading up to this trade, it was blowing my socks off, and others as well. I think the surprise was not necessarily the eventual trade, but the disaster that the Edmonton Elks have been all season, and all of that culminating in this shocking trade of Trevor Harris to Montreal for Antonio Simmons. So, I mean, they clearly wanted to move on from Trevor Harris and were looking to make a trade. It was an opportunity for Montreal with could be a season-ending injury to Vernon Adams Jr. to bring in insurance, whether that is as a startup or as a backup, in a solid player and CFL veteran in Trevor Harris. And yet so many questions about why this trade happened, what is happening in Edmonton, and a lot of questions about leadership in Edmonton as well, with Brock Sunderland at the top, and questions about leadership of on-field players as well. There was an interesting quote last week that said we need more, I can't remember exactly what it was, we need more out of the quarterback position in all areas, or something like that, that
Mhm.
alluded to something beyond on-field performance. And so there was speculation. We tried not to get into speculation around vaccination status too much, and yet when players or executives disclose their vaccine status, then that gives us opportunity to talk about it. And so I think one of the most interesting things coming out of this trade news is that we already knew that Brock Sunderland was, or is seeking, or has medical exemption maybe, for the vaccine. And it came out in Trevor Harris's interview upon arriving in Montreal that he is now vaccinated, but he was not. And it makes you wonder, he got vaccinated over the bye week. It sounds like he went to the United States to get that, which didn't make sense to me because I think we have all of the same vaccines, but perhaps he went to get the one shot Johnson & Johnson so that he could be fully vaccinated as quickly as possible. This is all speculation, but maybe that was a condition for this trade to happen. And then today, moving on to another piece, but directly connected, is James Wilder Jr. kind of went off on Twitter yesterday and today, coming to the defense of players making their personal decisions and saying that they put their bodies on the line for their employers. And lots of times I will come to bat for CFL players and the CFLPA for their causes. These are players that don't have guaranteed contracts, while head coaches can be fired and continue to make salary for years after their failure in their position, their contracted position. And yet James Wilder Jr. kind of went to Harris's defense and disclosed that he himself is not vaccinated. And all this on the same day that the CFL announced that they didn't say unvaccinated, but the CFL said that players who are not able to travel with their team will not be eligible to play in the CFL playoffs and Grey Cup. And that needed to happen because there is an unequal, the geography is different in the CFL East and West, where if you were in an Eastern club, you could very easily get in a car and drive from Ottawa to Toronto or Hamilton or whatever.
Meaning if they weren't vaccinated, they weren't going to be able to fly on a plane basically with their team.
Right, but there was the possibility open that they could find their own means of transportation. And for Western players, of course, that would be much more difficult. It's a 19-hour drive from Regina to Vancouver or whatever. And so that playing field needed to be leveled. And I think maybe some of this came out as a result of this potential trade of Trevor Harris to Montreal. So it's all very interesting and complicated, and some of the fallout of this very unusual season that we've had, one that we're happy to have had, but not without consequence with this COVID-19 pandemic.
And what it really says is they don't think Vernon Adams Jr. is coming back this year. Because I think if they thought he was coming back in several weeks or like 3 weeks or something like that, they wouldn't have made this move. But they made this move because they have a good team. They have a decent record. We will see, because I've heard, you hear stuff, Trevor Harris, they say, oh yeah, his arm strength isn't what it was. And, I really think that he was giving the shaft up there, basically. I mean, he didn't play horrible at times, but then other times he didn't play very well. So I don't know what's the answer. They seem to be on the verge of like cleaning house at the end of the season. Let's just get rid of. I mean, if it was me, ownership, you have a new team name, you're a new beginning. It's not a great start. It's not a great look for them. That's for sure.
It is, and it's really unfortunate because the rebrand and everything else coming into the season, I was thinking the Edmonton Elks were doing a great job of promoting the team with their marketing and all of that, and then their free agent acquisitions and the team that they had assembled. they did have their head coach from the 2019 season or 2020 season who was supposed to be this season kind of bail on them, which left them in a difficult position. But by all accounts, I mean, there were a lot of people thinking that Edmonton was the Grey Cup or West Division favorite based on, the roster that they had assembled. And
Yeah, I
so
remember going into the season, I started to listen to a bunch of CFL podcasts and like predictions and where players were, what players moved, and the Elks were one of those teams that was up there. Of course, Winnipeg was, but yeah, they were mentioned as one of the teams that were going to be top of the league in their estimation. So it'll definitely be interesting here going out because they did. We'll get to that game in a bit, but they did play a semi-competitive game against Winnipeg this past week.
that's true. They were right in that game.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think the problems are more off the field, maybe in the locker room. Like there are
Mhm.
leadership issues with this
Yes.
Edmonton club, right
Yep, definitely.
from the very top, and that's very evidenced in James Wilder Jr.'s commentary today on Twitter. And with their COVID outbreak early in the season, all
Mhm.
of it is just screams of poor leadership in positions of leadership, whether that's your starting quarterback and your primary running back and maybe others in that offense too, your general manager, whatever. But it's a bad situation. I guess the one thing I'll give them credit for moving forward. I think that's a great move. I'm not sure Taylor Cornelius is it, and yet I applaud them for making that move to look at two more quarterbacks, recognizing that their future is with somebody else, and then making the necessary move to trade Trevor Harris. So we'll see what happens there.
Yep, definitely. Um, Speaking about a team that is headed in a different direction, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers made a couple acquisitions this week. They acquired kicker Sergio Castello in the trade with the BC Lions. And they also signed Shaq Cooper, as Andrew Harris had that injury in this past game and sat out of practice, which I didn't even realize Shaq Cooper until that he got released by BC. I guess BC wasn't happy with their running game, but I think that's more to do with their offensive line, opening up holes than their running backs. So yeah. So Sergio Castillo had been in the league previously. I did see he was on a practice squad or with a training camp in the NFL earlier in the season. So, um, what do you think about those signings?
Great moves, and just another example of what an outstanding organization the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are. It's getting easier and easier to say because I have so
Mhm.
much respect for what's happening there. They're 9-1. This is a team that could say, look, we've got a great team here. We're rolling. Let's just keep going. And yet they want to get better. They recognize that you can always get better. And
Absolutely.
their kicking game has been rough this season. I think Ali Murtada actually had a pretty solid game. He missed an
Mhm.
important field goal in the fourth quarter of 44 yards, but that was his only miss on the night. He was 4 of 5, and in the week previous, um, head coach said that he was going to stick with him in spite of some pretty poor performances.
Yep.
And yet, Sergio Castillo has a 87% career field goal percentage in the CFL. I mean, he's one of the best kickers in the last decade. And so for them to consider the opportunity to make this trade with BC, because he hasn't been with BC this season. He's just
Mhm.
the property of the BC Lions,
Right.
as
Right.
Castillo's trying to land an NFL job. But
Mhm.
he had tried for whatever, a year and a half, and thought, maybe I'll get back and I want to play football. And Winnipeg was smart and went out and got a guy that is totally reliable when the game is on the line to kick a winning field goal. So just a great move. The Shaq Cooper move is a little bit bewildering because they are so committed to playing a Canadian at their running back position. And why wouldn't they with Andrew Harris and Brady Oliveira, who has looked honestly like as good as Andrew Harris? It seems so inappropriate to say, and yet every time he's gotten in there, they haven't missed a beat, and that's
Right,
testament
absolutely.
to their scheme and offensive line as well. So I think that's just a depth move. And I mean, they would have roster flexibility where they could still bring Shaq Cooper in and use him as a receiver out of the backfield or whatever. They would have to put, depending on how many Canadians they start, a Canadian receiver or tight end or something in to allow that. But maybe they just want to give another look. And maybe they are concerned. Andrew Harris was injured in that game, did not practice today. And so, maybe it's just insurance. They can pick up a veteran.
That's what I'm thinking.
Veteran from within the division. That's always valuable, who still remembers the playbook. And you're
playing them this week. So, that happens all the time. You pick up a player and that got released and you're playing that team this week. And I don't know how much that helps. I would assume it helps a little bit, but BC hasn't been playing that well. We'll get into the game a little bit before too long, but yeah, they haven't looked the greatest. So moving on here, we have Dean Evans, who was activated from the 6-game injured list, and Brandon Banks also practiced in full this week. So they're getting back to getting all their pieces back, the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So that's pretty interesting because they could be a team that challenges for that division, depending on it's gotten more competitive. So we'll see what happens, but definitely they're getting the pieces of their team that had been injured back.
Yeah, and isn't it? It still feels so strange to say the third place Hamilton Tiger Cats. I guess we've said it all year because they had a tough start, and yet I don't believe that this is a third place team. They're getting key pieces back at the right time. They could definitely go on a run here, having both of their quarterbacks, if not now, very soon, with Dane Evans being activated to the roster and Banks coming back.
Yeah. Could you see in the future, meaning the future this season, that a change happens, that the East teams there's 3 teams coming out of the East that are very strong compared to the West, maybe 2 strong teams? I'm kind of seeing it go in that direction because you could see Montreal, Hamilton, Toronto. You could see all 3 of those teams winning that division, but you go over to the West and you don't really have anybody but Winnipeg, Saskatchewan has been struggling of late. BC just totally has tanked.
Yeah, they were terrible
ever since that Whitehead got.
Or was Calgary great? We'll talk about that. But is Calgary that good? Is BC that bad? What does that mean about Saskatchewan? We have lots to figure out in the West.
So it's interesting. It's interesting to talk about. It's interesting to throw this stuff, and it's fun to see this all played out. And the last thing I had as far as news is the Red Blacks signed Tom Flacco, who had been with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, in the not the preseason, but training camp, and got cut. So he signed, and he's the brother of Joe Flacco, the NFL Baltimore Raven quarterback, Super Bowl winning quarterback. And that's interesting. Red Blacks have been bringing quarterbacks in on the roster, and I don't know if they know what direction they want to go in.
Yeah, I certainly don't either. And yet I think it's a great move for them. I think they
Hmm.
want to see different quarterbacks playing right now. Caleb Evans, who I'm still a fan of, but had
Yeah.
another 3 interception game. And I think, it's pretty clear Ottawa's not making the playoffs. So they need to see these guys
What they
play.
got.
It's really unfortunate that Taryn Christian was injured before he got a real chance and a real look.
Hmm.
But I imagine we'll see Devlin Hodges pretty soon. And this Tom Flacco signing is a good one, because when you bring in a quarterback, if you can bring in someone who has any CFL experience and like a CFL training camp, those players coming up here to learn the CFL game learn so much in the intensive, that is CFL camp, and that makes a huge difference for their acclimation to getting comfortable with the game and whatever else. So I think it's a fine move. I'm not sure how soon or if ever if we'll see
Hmm.
Tom Flacco, and yet that's good for them for continuing to go out and find players to bring in to get a look at, because they have the luxury of that. That's the one great thing about being terrible, is you can evaluate players
Right.
and find ones to build around going forward. They'd be really upset to hear us talking about them like they're finished, but
Eh, and it really is a transition when you have these college quarterbacks that come to the CFL. It's a different game. It's not depending on, I guess, what you played in college. If it's more of an NFL pro style, it definitely is a different game. So, not every quarterback is going to come up here and step right in and be good. It's a learning process, as anything. You need to have experience. You need to have, film where you can correct things. You're going to make mistakes, so it'll be interesting how that goes. That's for sure.
mhm. Yeah, and those player evaluations are so interesting too. That's where I have
Mhm.
so much respect for coaches when they review film on their own players first off and say these things can be corrected.
Right,
Ali
right,
Mortada can be a great kicker because the mechanics are there. There are a few things that need adjusting, or a quarterback who, reads the field well, but maybe doesn't throw the best ball, but has shown in practice that he can, to give them the opportunity to grow, to have the game slow down, and then to make the tough evaluations where sometimes a coach is like, he's just not going to get it.
right,
And that requires time and evaluation too. So,
right, absolutely. So did you
yeah,
have any other news?
just some very small notes, but they're kind of fantasy notes, but also just players injured and returning from injuries. So Toronto's really exciting right now
Oh,
because
yeah.
they've had a really rough go with injuries all season long, and Enoch Muamba looks to be coming back. I'm not sure if it'll be this week, but is practicing again, so hopeful. And so that's great news there. And Shaq Evans is practicing in Saskatchewan. And Joan Brescacin is running and cutting hard in
Yes, I
Toronto.
did
And so you
see.
have to think that there's hope that his return is coming soon. So some great news for a surging Toronto team.
Yes.
Um, and other than that, I think we've named everything on my list too. But
Okay.
yeah, it's going to be great down the stretch, seeing what happens with these teams and all the question marks that we have for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and we're going to head to the games. And our first game this week, week 11, this past weekend, was Friday night. It was Winnipeg headed to Edmonton for a rematch, and Winnipeg took this one 26-16. But this was a game, thinking about this game ahead of time, you thought, blowout. I even asked you last episode, give me a couple reasons why a fan would want to watch this game, because I was saying, yeah, it's going to be a blowout. This was a competitive game. This really was a competitive game, and Zach Caleros didn't play the greatest. There was a chance in the fourth quarter where, Zach Caleros almost threw a pick six. The guy dropped it, or they would have been up by 7. I think it was tied at that point, or close to it. And Winnipeg was a little sluggish. They did end up winning it. Taylor Cornelius just, I don't know what to say. At times he held on to the ball too long. He just looks awkward sometimes throwing the ball. I don't know what it is. He has those good wide receivers there. Darrell Walker, man, he had a catch that hit him right in the hands that would have been a first down. That you can't believe that, you can only do so much as a quarterback. You put the ball, even if you're struggling, you put the ball where it needs to be. Guys need to make plays. And they were a couple plays from winning this game. And you would say, Winnipeg, yeah, they were a couple plays from winning this game.
Yeah, well, you highlighted the most interesting piece from that game was that drop by Darrell Walker, I
Yes.
think. And this was coming off after he had said something much to the opposite of what you said, which was, a receiver can only do so much if you're not throwing me the ball. And that was an interview before the game. And then there was a very poorly thrown pass, the previous attempt to Walker. That would have been a first down. It was thrown really poorly, just thrown short into the dirt. And, I think Darrell, actually, I don't think Walker did have word. I really wanted to see the sideline. They didn't give us a camera of that.
Yeah.
And yet I think they reported that Cornelius went to Walker to talk about it. And then on the very next drive, Darrell Walker dropped a ball that hit him right in both hands, right between the numbers. And it was just, it's just another example of what a mess things are there. And yet, you're right. They were in this game right into the fourth quarter. Winnipeg was a little bit sloppy. They lost Andrew Harris, and as mentioned, without a missed that field goal early in the fourth. And it was looking like there was a possibility that Edmonton could squeak out this victory. But, Winnipeg just shook off the missed field goal and went out and did what they needed to do. And just seized control of that lead and shut the game down. But yeah, it was more interesting than we had anticipated, I think.
No, that's for sure. And Brady Oliveira, came in the game after Andrew Harris got injured on that touchdown. And he ended up getting 100 yards. And I mean, it seems like whoever you plug into the Winnipeg offense at running back, they're going to be successful. It's just the way the offensive line blocks and, the talent they have on their offense. And I just think they're not going to miss a beat too much with Andrew Harris out. I don't know how long he's going to be out or whatever, but it's and they got BC coming up this week. I mean, they're just chugging along.
Yeah, and they have to feel confident too. That's such a tough spot for BC to be in, much like Saskatchewan the other week, where you play a home and home, but you start at home. You have the opportunity to go up 1-0 in that series, and you lose, and you lose badly. So now BC has to go to Winnipeg and try and turn that around. And it's a tough order.
That's gonna be a tough one. And I mean, every week it seems like they have somebody that steps up. If you stop one of the receivers or, slow somebody down, somebody stepped up. And in this particular week, it was Rashid Bailey, who had a great game and a touchdown. So, yeah, they are a complete team from what you can tell. They even had a kind of interesting play on special teams on a return that they had a lateral on at the very beginning of the game. I thought that was cool. I wasn't expecting that. So yeah, they're exciting to watch.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that one too, because that is not just coaching but film study, right? You don't have a special teams play with that lateral just in your back pocket to run against anyone.
Right.
They watched film on the BC Lions
Mm-hmm.
and realized how much they closed to the ball carrier on those sideline kicks.
Yep.
And they planned for it accordingly, and it was beautifully executed play. And again, it's just another example of that great coaching
Yep.
that they have in Winnipeg. Going to be tough to beat.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Just last comment on this game that I did like. I mean, Taylor Cornelius didn't have a great outing in this one, going 17 of 29 for 187 with a touchdown. Of those 17 completions, he found 9 different receivers, which I found interesting, but also impressive. That one thing he is showing is that he's able to spread the ball around to find different receivers in different
Mm-hmm.
positions. I mean, I suppose it could be viewed the other way as a lack of kind of identity or focus, but I thought that was really interesting for the leading receiver. It was Greg Ellingson, but to have a pretty humble day with 3 receptions for 67 yards, and then to see this long list of pass catchers in that game. So we'll see where they can take it, but it looks like they're going to ride with Taylor Cornelius for now and maybe the remainder of the season. We'll see.
Yep. So our next game that we had was Saturday. We had a double header on Saturday, and it was Montreal headed to the nation's capital in Ottawa, and no Vernon Adams Jr. Ottawa took this one. Montreal took this one 27-16, and this was the first game that Schultz had started. It's not Schultz. Schultz.
Mhm.
Is that how you pronounce that, Schultz? And I didn't think he played horrible. I think, especially at the beginning of the game, he looked pretty good. Caleb Evans, on the other hand, did not. He struggled, and that might be more to do with the defense, the Alouettes' defense, than what they have on offense. They weren't able to run the ball very well. Cameron Artis-Payne started again. He did decent, not a great average. He had 4.4 yards a carry. Could have done a little bit better, but then DeLance Turner only had 32 yards on the other side. So
yeah, and on just 7 carries, you thought he might have more of a role, so, helping out the quarterback and getting more carries. I can't figure out why they're not willing to try to run the ball a little bit more there, especially when DeLance Turner looked not too bad the previous week.
Right, yeah.
But
so Jake Winicke, I mean, what can you say about this guy?
TD Jake.
Yes. Although he made a drop in that game.
It's true.
But he made up for it. It was like a drop that hit him right in the hands, but he definitely made up for it. You can't tell me that he doesn't have the best hands in the CFL, because from what I've seen this year, if you look at the top 10 receiving plays in the league this year, I bet he has 3 of them, because that's how spectacular he's been at times.
He has made a case for sure, maybe even a case for their team's MOP or MVP this season. It's been awesome. And the fantasy people are recognizing it too, because he's over 10,000 this week, I think, for the first time. So we'll talk about that in a bit too. But,
yes.
But Jake Winicke's been outstanding. Yeah, I'll just say, like, what a frustrating team, man. I feel for Al's fans right now, because there's so much good on this Montreal team, and then there's kind of a lot of bad mistakes. It seems sometimes the team can't get into a rhythm. Like, you have to love how Matthew Schultz just is really stepping up and starting to carry this team. And, he's going to have a little bit more pressure on him with the acquisition of Trevor Harris, but maybe he can really grab a hold. I mean, 21 of 34 for 281, 1 touchdown, 1 interception that's not a bad outing. I mean, that's
no, especially
not
for your first
up,
start.
And when you've got a complementary defense that can go out and get 10 sacks on a day, that is a great defense there.
And you have a running game.
Oh
Because the
yeah,
running game has been pretty solid
always.
all year.
Yeah, and don't lose much with Cameron Artis-Payne either.
Right.
So that's another team that seems in some ways to be able to plug and play, and yet we've seen them take undisciplined penalties. We've seen them struggle to get into rhythm. Just lots of penalties and whatever else. But.
Yep. Absolutely. So our last game of the weekend was a game going in. It was Calgary at BC, and I didn't know what we were going to get out of this game. We had
It was the
No
game of the
Lucky
week.
White.
It was supposed to be great.
Yes.
wasn't great,
Lucky
was it?
Whitehead. And when the game started, BC went right down the field, scored a touchdown. I said, oh, this is going to be good. It was not.
It was not.
BC kind of, after the first score, they decided to go home, or I don't know what was going on, but Calgary was good in every phase of the game, from interception returns for touchdown, kickoff return for touchdown, passing touchdowns, you name it, they had it. And BC just struggled. Mike Riley struggled. Didn't seem like they could protect him very well. And sometimes it seemed like he held on to the ball too long. I don't know when they got behind, if he was waiting, trying to get the deep ball or what it was, but they struggled mightily.
They really did. How often do you see Michael Riley with 77 passing yards at the half? I mean,
No, that's crazy.
That was just shocking. And and he ended. I mean, he didn't play the entire game, but finished 13 of 25 for 145 and 2 interceptions. And that was a shocker. I thought BC might really be able to show up and put a stamp that they deserve to be a top, or not a top, but second in the Western Division, and they looked awful. Or maybe Calgary looked great.
And
it all seems to be coming together for the Calgary Stampeders right now. I mean, not a flashy win. Certainly, Bo Levi Mitchell had a good day. And yet, as a complete team effort, like you said, on all sides of the ball, with players contributing in so many ways, this team looks good. I mean, that return by Rock Thomas and the play of the defense of the secondary, they're making a statement.
Yeah, they played well. Kadeem Carey, I mean, he only had 67 yards on 12 carries, but it was a 5.6 yard average. It didn't seem to run the ball. Total, BC doesn't even try to run the ball, it seems like. I mean, their top rusher had 6 carries. I mean, they seem like they're all in on the pass and just abandon the run. I mean, once you get behind, of course, that makes sense. But they need to establish, a running game so those rushers aren't, pinning their ears back, as they say, and going after the quarterback every time. So I don't know what the answer for them, because their defense didn't play particularly well in that game. So I don't know. They're just headed in a downward spiral, and I don't see them winning this week going into Winnipeg. Is just, I don't know what to say about them. At one point, they were like one of the most exciting teams in the CFL for like a 3-week period, and now I can say that they're really not very good. They're really not very good for whatever reason.
Yeah, is that the Lucky Whitehead effect?
I don't know.
Is Lucky Whitehead that good? I mean, he was making a case for it, being atop the league in receiving until his injury. But yeah, I don't like that offense. I mean, I'm with you. You can't give your primary running back 7 carries in a game, and this wasn't the first time. That's the norm all season long. Whether it's been Butler or Shaq Cooper, maybe with those receivers and Michael Riley, you can make a decision to live and die by the passing game, but it hasn't been working, and we're seeing other clubs demonstrate that when you have a balanced attack, and you don't have to run all the time, but you need to be able to run enough and successfully enough that it makes things easier on the passing game.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as Calgary goes, they seem to be able to plug anybody in at wide receiver and have a successful game. They've had some injuries at wide receiver, and they had and I'm not going to even try to pronounce his name.
Oh, we can do it. Luther Hakunavanu.
There you go, Hakunavanu.
They're perfect. See, we can all do it.
3 receptions, 56 yards. He had a touchdown, and then Nick Holly had an appearance, and he is former XFL Houston Roughneck. So he had 5 catches, 60 yards. Is just, they whoever they've been plugging in, and Bo Levi Mitchell has been playing much better. And the difference between a rookie quarterback and Bo Levi Mitchell, when you don't catch a pass from Bo Levi Mitchell, he gets in your face about it. He's going to tell you that, yeah, you should have caught that pass. You shouldn't have dropped it. So, big difference.
Yeah, and look at Richard Sindani, the Calgary Stampeders' leading receiver in that game. 6 catches on 6 attempts for 60 yards. The pride of Campbell Collegiate, my alma mater high school in Regina. Pretty awesome to see him have a big game like that.
That's cool, yeah. Yeah, that's awesome to see guys like that. So yeah, any final thoughts about this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it can move into the preview of next week. I mean, it makes that third Saskatchewan-Calgary matchup all the more interesting with Calgary winning those 3 in a row. Yeah, nothing else on that
you
game.
You have to mention the kicker. He got one of the players of the week, and 6 for 6. Not too bad.
It's true. You got to give a kicker his due when he goes 6 for 6.
Yes. That's a lot of field goals. And they scored 39 points. If they turned some of those field goals into touchdowns, it could have been even higher. So
that's true.
So yeah, as we go into week 12, the preview, our first game is a pretty exciting game. We got a lot of good games this week that are interesting, that's for sure. Our first is Toronto at Montreal. So they did say that quarterback Harris is going to dress. He will not start, of course, but he will be at the stadium. Trevor Harris and will dress. Toronto, who's been on a roll of late, and they're getting some guys back, but their road presence hasn't been the best this year. I'd like to see some more consistency on the road. They can do it. This is a pretty good matchup. It'll be interesting to see how well they do.
Yeah, that's right. This one is a bit of a tough call. I mean, you have to think Toronto is the favorite, and yet Montreal can be a tough place to win. Montreal is the most fun city in Canada. Many people will say Toronto's not bad, but Montreal has a reputation, and it's happened many times that visiting teams in Montreal go out and have a really poor game for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I think this is an opportunity for Montreal to make a statement at home, especially with Matthew Schultz coming off the win, but also with the trade this week, that I think it's possible that they come up big this week. And yet Toronto is rolling. They look like a complete team right now, and things are just keep coming together. If anyone's on an upward surge,
so they got
it's them.
Got a lot of fresh guys.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, they just keep getting better. And so that'll be great too, because if Toronto goes in and wins, then they're telling everyone we are the champs in the East. They're going to pull ahead of their competitors and on a great win streak at the right time. So this one's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And our next game we jump into isn't as competitive. We have Ottawa going into Hamilton. Hamilton gets Dean Evans back. Everybody's getting healthy. I just don't see Ottawa. This was a game I said about Winnipeg the week before. I just don't see this being competitive at all. I see Hamilton just taking this game totally, and it's not going to be close.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there too. I've kind of oversold the Hamilton Ticats all season long. Part of me still thinks they are, the second best team in the CFL, and yet their record hasn't shown it. But I think they can really start getting on a roll too, with Banks' return, with Addison finally back and having a great return. So to have those weapons is going to be huge, and then to have the luxury of both of their starting quarterbacks and being able to use them however necessary, whether it's to relieve injury or in tandem or to make a change. Those guys have both led that team at different times in the last few years, and I think that team can do it in that way. So I only see good things for the Hamilton Ticats coming up.
Yeah, and this is like, isn't this the first game where we have, everybody back, on their offense? They got Dane Evans,
Yep.
who'd been playing pretty well. He hasn't played with, his full complement of receivers and yeah. So it'll be exciting to see what they do. They should just go ahead and take care of Ottawa, but you never know in the CFL. You never know what will happen. That's why they play the games. So
That's why they play the games.
Yep, absolutely.
And the second of the triple header, we go to Winnipeg for BC making that tough trip to Winnipeg after getting beat up at home by the Blue Bombers. Are we giving BC a chance in this one after saying anything can happen in the CFL?
Anything can happen, but this isn't going to happen. I'm sorry. The way that the offensive line was playing for BC, they can't run the ball. They don't even try to run the ball. Going to Winnipeg with a bad offensive line is not the way to go, because they will just crush you. And I see this as not a close game either. But anything's possible.
Yeah.
Anything's possible. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I got to pick Winnipeg in this one. I think the spread was like 14.5 or something.
Yeah, that might be too low.
That sounds like it's set about right. But
right.
I definitely think they're going to win this one.
Right. So. And then we have one of our more exciting games of the weekend is Saskatchewan, who's had a bye last week, and they're back in Calgary, as we said, for their third matchup in the last 4 weeks. So Calgary has been looking pretty good. Saskatchewan's going to get a couple guys back. They get looks like Shaq Evans might be back, Duke Williams. So we'll see if Cody Fajardo can put this all together, and we'll see what happens. I'm excited about that game. Unfortunately, it's like a little late, at least for us here on the East Coast. Are you staying up for that one?
Oh, always. Absolutely. I'd stay up for any teams in the CFL to watch the third of a triple header. But
yeah.
But absolutely, I'll be watching that one. It's going to be interesting. If Saskatchewan loses this game, it is going to get ugly in Riderville, and maybe not within the team, but within the fan community and the fan boards on Twitter and Facebook and their bulletin board, message board. It's going to blow up. And yet the Riders have to be feeling good this week. I think Shaq is not 100% certain, but seems like maybe go. I don't know where to put that percentage at. But yeah, Duke Daquille Williams is going to make his debut. I don't know if you saw the clip, but he made a one-handed, fully extended grab in practice the other day, which was clearly for the media who we're going to be given an interview after practice, but he seems fired up and ready to go. Cody Fajardo's got to be excited to have those weapons, and yet after all of this talk about the receivers not stepping up, if they have a rough game, and particularly if Cody Fajardo has a rough outing, I mean, it's a team game, of course. That's going to be a tough loss to lose 3 in a row to the Stampeders, and to have them. Will they overtake them in the standings? Sorry, I need to peek, but anyway, it's that's a bad slide if it happens, and so it's going to be a good one. I think the Riders
absolutely
have to show
another good weekend.
They can pull it together.
Yeah, another good weekend. So with a little time we have left, we're gonna do our fantasy studs and fantasy duds. So first up, I have a couple studs in Brian Burnham. I had a decent game. He didn't score a touchdown. He had 16.3 fantasy points. And if you started Brady Oliveira, then you're better than me because he got 10.5 points. There is no way you could have known he was going to have 100 yards in this game. I don't see any way. Some of the duds were really duds. You start off with Mike Riley, who, you had to pay $11,000 to get Mike Riley
for and 2 points.
You got 1.8 fantasy points. Yes, that's right. And my other dud was Nick Dembski, who was almost 7,500. And you did a little better. You got 2.4 fantasy points. So our duds were really duds this week.
Yeah, it was.
So how did you do in fantasy? I had my second best week this week in fantasy.
Oh, well done. Did you have Michael Riley?
I did not have Michael Riley.
I thought you always take Riley. I took him because I always think you can count on Michael Riley to have a great passing game, even win or lose. Not this one. I had a rough week. I had 69 points or something. I only had 3 in double digits. I had Kenny Lawler for 11.2, Ryan Davis for 15.7. My best pick was the Montreal Alouettes defense.
Yep, I had those.
Actually, and I only took, was that this week or last week? Anyway, I took the Montreal Alouettes defense, who was good for 23 points with those 10 sacks and 3 interceptions and whatever else. But I did not have a very good week.
10 sacks. That's crazy. 10 sacks in a game.
Yeah, and we talked about that strategy last week. Do you take a defense? I've had defenses scored negative points in the past.
Yeah.
And that can really turn you off.
The last 2 weeks, I've had the highest scoring defense. I went with Kenny Lawler, who had 11.2 points, and then I took a couple BC wide receivers. I took Javon Coyote, who had 11.3.
I took Keon Hatcher. He had 4.8. And you had Lamar Durant. So we tried.
Yeah, he had 9.3. My second running back was, Milinovic Leetry. Running. He got 0. He's a fullback. Sometimes he gets a carry or 2. I was hoping for a touchdown or something. Cameron Artis Payne had 8.5, but my quarterback was Matthew Schultz, who had 21.4. So that wasn't bad. I was
$7,000 or whatever he was. Good job, Bill.
Yeah. Couldn't hit on those wide receivers. I had Nick Dembski in there for a minute, and I'm like, let me put in Kenny Lawler. He's coming back. So that would have been bad.
Yeah.
So who you like this week?
Oh, well, I've picked a team, but I always revise it. But
yeah,
I've spent big on Braylon Addison. That seems like a go-to move, whether it's Masoli or Evans playing Ottawa. I think the 10,818 is well worth it. I think Chandler Worthy's on a roll, and he had a hot game against Montreal. I don't know if that
Yep.
means maybe he becomes a decoy or not, but I'm hoping that he has another big one, and particularly because he also returns. You're always good for some more points
Yep.
there. Calgary, you never know who to choose, but I'm looking at Markeith Ambles at 6,500 and change, and that feels to me like not a bad pick. Saskatchewan's secondary has had to shuffle guys around in the last number of weeks, although coming off the bye, maybe they're not too bad. Yeah, I saw Blaze Brown, I think, didn't practice today. So anyway, there's still maybe questions in the Saskatchewan secondary. Although I don't like my running back picks, so I've probably spent too much money elsewhere.
Yeah, that's
I've got
hard. The
Sean
running backs
Thomas,
are difficult.
Erlington, and Rock Thomas. Rock Thomas might not even get touches on offense, but he had that big kickoff return, and he's only 2,500. So I thought there might be some return yardage there. And Thomas Erlington burns people a lot when they pick him because some days he only touches the ball 5 times. And yet against Ottawa, maybe they're up big and they give him the rock down the stretch. So, and then I got Matt Schultz at quarterback. I'm expecting big things out of Schultz. I'd still love to see an Argos win,
No,
but
that's a bad
I want to
pick.
see Matt Schultz succeed.
Yeah, that would be cool. No, it could happen. I kind of like, and he hasn't really had a bad game this year. And Kadeem Carey, he's only 6,700. That's not a bad. That's not bad. The one that is ridiculous, and I mean ridiculous, is Brandon Banks is still over 12,000. I would never pick him. That he hasn't proven this year that he can even have. I don't know. I guess injuries and inconsistent play at the quarterback position has really hurt him. But there's no way I'm paying like 12,000 for him.
Yeah, is Duke Williams intriguing at all? I couldn't believe the price tag. It seems pretty high.
9,325. That's a little too. You have no idea what to expect from him.
Yeah.
If you do, you know better than me. I don't know. Shaq Evans is 7,156.
Yeah, watch the practice report this week if you're going to pick Shaq Evans. That could be a steal.
Yeah.
And yet, I'm not sure he's certain to start this week.
You know a guy that really could take over a game because every time he touches the ball, he makes some amazing plays at times. Just doesn't seem to get that many targets is Devarius Daniels. I just he's at 6,000. Has a good game here or there, but for the most part, he's almost been like a decoy almost.
Yeah, not getting a lot of use at that boundary wide receiver position. It's kind of surprising that the Toronto quarterbacks, no matter who's behind center, haven't really made him the primary guy. And Eric Rodgers likewise has, I guess they've spread the ball well in Toronto, and they've thrown that shorter passing game to the wide side of the field quite often. But you have to be a little bit surprised at the production of both Tavares Daniels and Eric Rodgers. And Rodgers has had injury, of course, through the season as well. But Daniels, big surprise.
Also, Bo Levi Mitchell, he's only $50-some more than Matthew Schultz. 84.72. That could be a decent pick. But the highest quarterback of the week is Vernon Adams Jr. at 12,405. I wouldn't recommend that one. If you listen to anything that I say this week, I probably wouldn't go with that one.
Yeah, don't go with that one. I think you're 100% bang on there. I think they just don't update the prices when guys are on an injured list, and so maybe you get the last
they just
numbers.
Keep them on there because Trevor Harris is on there, and I guess if you go with those guys, you're not going to do so well. So.
Yeah, and we didn't talk CFL Pick'em at all, but you can play CFL Pick'em with us as well, where you just pick the winners and losers of each game. you can find 3-minute warning leagues for CFL Fantasy and CFL Pick'em. So go on out there and join Bill and I so we can have some banter online and talk about our great picks and talk about our terrible ones too. We really
Absolutely.
hope to see you again soon, and happy to have you listening to 3-Minute Warning. This is a Canadian Football League podcast. I am Dallas Bergen at CFL Fans Toronto, and this is Bill Beer at Pigskin Punk 13. And you can see us live on the All Sports All Plays network Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern live, also on YouTube. And the following morning, you can find the audio of this podcast available wherever you find your podcasts. Thanks for listening tonight. Hope you enjoy the games this week.
We will see you later.